Today, we're going to do something about this really high step into the van. We're going to install the OWL side steps. Let's get to it. So one of the first things I'm curious about is actually how high the step in is. So let's find out. So basically right about 23 or so inches. We'll come back after the steps are installed and see what a difference it makes. All right, so the steps and everything you need comes in 2 boxes. One is just normal shipping through FedEx, at least it was for me. And then the other one is through freight. So don't be surprised if you get one, not the other, and you're wondering what's going on. So the first one that came in for me were all the brackets and the hardware. And then a couple days later, we got the freight delivery for the side steps. They're very well packaged. You can see they got all this foam on here to protect the surface, which is nice. I'll probably leave the foam on until I actually get them installed on the van. I'm not gonna lie, but one thing I'm really disappointed about from OWL Vans right off the get-go is that there's no instructions. What are you guys doing? I know you have a video, that's great and all, but instructions for knowing exactly what size drill bit you should use for the different rib nuts and things like that, so you don't mess that up, and where you put the brackets on both sides, especially for different lengths of the vans, if that is a difference, will be really nice. So I watched the video. It does go through most of the things. It kind of cuts a little bit. Should be enough to get installed. I really wish they included some paper instructions so that you can easily reference it while you're down there on your back installing these things and not having to scroll through a video all over the place 20 times while you're trying to get this done. So rant over, let's go. I recently installed this bed kit here from Flatline Van Company, and I was really disappointed with those instructions. It's literally step 1, install it. Step 2, a second set of hands might help. But at least they had some hardware stuff, not much. It was not a whole lot. It was actually really pathetically minimal instructions. But at least they had something. Come on, OWL. Come on. Seriously, these things aren't cheap. It's almost $3,000 to get these side steps shipped here because they're the 170s, so they're extra price. But I mean, come on. Give us some paper. First thing I'm gonna do is open up all these guys. First impression, it's a very nice piece, very heavy duty. All right, one down. Let's see how many more we got. Okay, got everything unboxed. Just as a reminder, my van's the 170 extended. That means the 170-inch wheelbase kit. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 A brackets. That's what these big ones are called, A brackets. And then we have B bracket mounting plates. And we have 5 for the passenger side and 4 for the driver's side. You don't need as much support on the driver's side because it's only really the driver door that you'll be standing on, but the passenger side obviously has the sliding door. And then we have all of these, I think they call them washer plates. Basically, it kind of sandwiches the the seam of the van right like that as you tighten that down onto that. And then of course all the hardware. Now with the 170 kit, at least where I got it from, they sell it with the tread plate, which is kind of nice. It came with these things. I have no idea what these are for. They look like pieces of scrap metal or weren't completely made or what, but I guess I will see if this goes anywhere at some point. All right, so I have all the brackets lined up, basically more or less where they should be. You start out 15 inches away from this seam, and that's where the center of this first bracket will be. It's basically more or less in the middle of the door. So as you step in, that's where all of the support will be. And then 23-inch spacing between all the next ones. On the 170, there's 5 of them. You can see kind of where it'll end up with the side step here. Probably use some of these holes right here to mount it to. There's some extra length there, and that should be fine. You know, we're not really going to be stepping there. And then in front of the passenger side, I have the driver's side step, just as a reference. The driver's side step is shorter by almost a foot, and basically the driver's side would end up here on the van. And the reason for that, little sneak peek for next video, make sure you're subscribed, are the side ladder. So I'll get that installed soon. Again, make sure you're subscribed. I'll see you there. But I wanted to have everything laid out as a point of reference. It helps me think about these things and picture and make sure I'm putting them in a place that makes sense. And I think, you know, basically what they say in their video probably makes sense, which is a good thing. And then we have these brackets here. This one with the open end is for the front, the one under the front door, and then all the others mount, I think, like this. I'll double check if it's on that side or that side, or if it even matters. But yeah, so now I need to start marking and drilling some holes. Also, now that I got the side steps out here, I realized what this plate goes. It goes underneath here, basically like that. This is upside down, so we go underneath there like that to you know, give some extra support there, I guess, or just block that off. So just FYI. Okay, so first step, measure 15 inches from here and create a mark. I'm going to go ahead and just mark out the next brackets, 23-inch spacing from line to line, center to center. I think it'll probably just be easier to do that now before the bracket's on. So I'm going to do that and get back to you. All right, now that I got all 5 positions marked out on the van, I shouldn't really need to worry about measuring anything anymore, at least on this side. Until I get to the driver's side I will, but now all I have to do is take the bracket like here and line it up with the mark and mark the first holes, which are basically these 2 ones on the front, side to side, and then we'll drill those out. This line here, in line with the wing right here, this part that sticks up and out, just like that, and you can see it gets covered, which is exactly why I continued the line upwards to just help get that positioned just right, just like that. And then you can mark out those 2 holes. Then you want to make sure that your eyes are nicely aligned, and that looks pretty good to, maybe just a tiny bit more, right about there. Mark out the holes, starting out with a small pilot hole. Owl Vans recommends a 1/4 inch bit. This is smaller than that. This is just for a pilot hole, and then I'll use I'm actually going to end up doing one size bigger, a 17/64, just to give a little bit of extra tolerance on these guys. Like I said, I'm going one size up to 17/64 as opposed to a 1/4 inch, which would be 16/64. So that's really what you, realistically, if you're using a 1/4 inch bit, you want to have a little bit of a space there anyways. So I think this is probably a good decision. Alright, next thing you do is get one of the bags of A-bracket hardware. They're 1/4 inch or 1/4 20 bolts, so they're all the same. 2 will go into these riv nuts and 2 will go into the nylock nuts. The nylock nuts are for these pieces here, and then the riv nuts are for up here. So the first thing you do is, now that we have these first 2 holes drilled up, we'll put the bracket back on with the 2 of the bolts, and then we'll mark the placement for the riv nut holes. So It's always a good sign when it goes in like that. I'm just gonna put the nylock nuts really quick, just a little bit, just so the bolt doesn't actually come off on me when I don't want it to. Obviously I'm not tightening this, just threading it on just to make sure nothing comes off unexpected. And then for their videos, you want to apply a nice good upward pressure and mark on the back side. So let's get underneath there and get to it. All right, so you can see how it looks. You want to just sort of get that nice and squared away. I am pushing it up to make sure that everything stays nice and tight. And then basically you can mark out this shape of the slot. And it is nice that these are slotted, because with riv nuts, sometimes as you tighten them, as you can do the most perfect job marking and pre-drilling the pilot hole, but then when you clamp down on the riv nut, it gets off center. And it's hard to control that sometimes. So having the slots gives you a little bit of freedom to play around with. So basically I have the two big black globs there, basically the size of the slot, and I have a tiny little notch on the edge here, on the end, which is basically just to mark where the center is in terms of height, and then I'll just kind of eyeball the center from there, and with the slots that should be fine. So I'm also noticing some rust on these components. This is pretty bad. I have like 4,000 miles on this van. It should not be rusting like that. Come on, Mercedes. It's terrible. Alright, I'm going to use my pilot bit here just for reference. This is a 5/32. Basically just a hair over 1/8 inch. You know, anything small will do the job. And then for the riv nuts, you do need a specific size bit, and the reason why is because the hole diameter is very important with riv nuts, because the riv nuts kind of clamp down, they squish down, and there's only so much area once they squish out. Once they squish down, there's only so much area that they go out for a clamping diameter basically, and so if it's too big, then it's easy for the riv nut to move around. So again, this is 23/64. And see, I have a huge wad of painter's tape there, basically just to act as a brake so I don't go way too far in. There we go. And metal shavings everywhere, so be careful. Wear eye protection at the very least. I'm gonna get a deburring tool and quickly deburr this, and then I will paint the inside of the holes, and once that dries, install the riv nuts. You know, really, when you're working with metal, wear some gloves. Wear some nice mechanics gloves that are nice and thick. Quick deburr all around, especially around all this extra material they have here. One thing I like to do is take the riv nut, put a bolt in it, and you can just quickly insert it into the hole. Make sure it's at a nice good fit. Not much wiggle room. So should be good to go. I'm gonna get these painted and move on to the next one. Now I'm using some Rust-Oleum enamel paint. You don't want to use a water-based paint if you're trying to prevent rust. So that's what I got. I got stuff that kind of matches the color of the van, just in case. Really doesn't matter because nobody's gonna see this, but if you have the option, then why not, right? Alright, so I just got done marking the last holes. Another thing I realized is the 23-inch spacing is a very loose suggestion. and the reason is because what's on the back of the van. Let me show you. So essentially started out on the very next one. So the second one from the front, I had to move the marking about half an inch back. And the reason is because this drain hole was in the way of where the 23-inch would have been. It would have lined up around the drain hole, and that's no good. So I positioned it just to the side of it, and that's okay. One thing to note is there's all these other plugs right here. You don't want to cover these because if you ever have to get into them, you would have to take off your sides, your whole side step, if you need to unplug it, and you don't want to do that. And so with the next one, for example, right here, I had to move about 1.5 inches over, and that was, you can see basically where I had to mark it, because otherwise it would have, 23 inches would have covered it again. So I basically marked right next to it, and then I had to carve out a lot of this material here. It's basically just sealant, I don't know, silicone or something like that from the factory, just to, you know, be protection, corrosion protection, nothing structural or anything. I had to carve that out because that was really bumpy, and it was causing the bracket to kind of sit out at an angle, which wouldn't be very good for, you know, the structure and having any sort of integrity there. And then the next one down was even worse. It ended up being, what, 2 or 3 inches further back. Again, partially because I would have covered up the drain plug right there, but then to fit it behind the plug, which is sort of where I think it should have been, you can see how deep that was. You can basically see, this would expose, right? You can see how thick that was, basically 1/4 inch there, and that was causing the bracket to really sit off like that. And so I kind of carved out just a right spot right there, and it fits in nice and snug and flat, and that's good to go. And then on the very end, there was no issue at all. It's just nice and flat. One thing I am a little worried about is where these slots line up is basically right where that ridge is. So the rev nuts might be a little bit messed up from that. So I don't know, maybe I should lower these slots 1/4 inch to be on this surface instead of on this ridge. We'll see how it goes. Okay, so around these holes where the rev nuts go in, there's still all this material that really sticks out quite a bit, and the rev nuts really can only handle a certain thickness and still get a good clamp on the material. So what I'm doing is getting a Forstner bit and clearing it out around there. Ideally, I would have done this with just the pilot hole, and I'll probably do that on the driver's side, because Forstner bits were gonna walk like crazy with a big hole like that. But with the pilot hole, might be able to be centered and get a nice clean ring. You can see it's kind of chewed up there. Trying to do what I can with it, but yeah, start with the pilot hole, do the Forstner bit, big enough Forstner bit to clear out that stuff just lightly, and then drill the full hole. I'm pretty sure I'm destroying my bit by doing that, but that's okay. I'd rather get a good clamp on it. A little bit more to go. Only slightly sketchy. Alright, I'm gonna paint the hell out of that. Alright, now we are on the driver's side. You can see I have it all laid out. On this side there are 4 brackets, as you can see. Again, you basically start 15 inches behind the seam and continue on from there. Ollivans recommends a 30-inch spacing on this side. Maybe that works for the 144, which is what the install video was. I found if I did 30 inches all the way, this bracket would basically end up kind of more or less lined up here, and I'm just sort of loosely placing this, but that's not a lot of tolerance really. I don't think that would fit. So I did 28 inches spacing, which gave me basically an extra 6 inches this way on this last bracket, and there's more than enough room to mount here. So I think that'll be pretty good. 28 inches for me, maybe for you. You do you. Obviously, I'll have to see how it lines up underneath the van and see how much leeway there is, but at least that'll be the starting guidelines. So let's get to it. First two seem to line up pretty well. I promise I didn't plan this. So the second one should line up basically on top of this extra little seam here. I don't know what that's for, but it's basically have to get it on that side. Plenty of area for the riv nut on this side. Alright, like that. But this side is again right on one of these ridges. I don't know if these vans are all different or what, but I mean, that's like almost they're aiming for it. So the riv nut will really not like this here. So I don't know what else I could do. On a side note, all of these guys from the seat install still looking good after over a year. And I found a little note to myself for where the shower drain most likely will be. We'll see how that ends up in the end, but that's the original plan from a year ago. Alright, so with this one here, I talked about before, the hole, you know, where the riv nut would be is right on this edge, and also, you know, because of this thing here, this little raised line here, the seam, the riv nut would also be in the middle of this hole. You know, I don't know what's behind there. I don't want to risk it. So what I decided to do is I'm going to drill some additional holes further up so that it lines up basically here and here. And so I'm going to drill these holes right here and here between the two slots, or between, you know, the slots here and here, and then up, I don't know, half an inch or so. So I'm going to do that now. Alright, so I opened up to 5/16, quick deburr, and then before I touch up the hole with some black paint, I'm going to make sure it fits nicely underneath where I want it to. Alright, so that's what that looks like, and that is in line with flat spots, it looks like. So I'll mark this up and show you in a second. Alright, so that's where the slot would have been on one side. So that's where the slot would have been on one side. And then here where the two new holes are, you can see how they're nicely placed on that rib. This one is just sort of on the edge of that curve, but I'm not worried about that. Of course, like I said before, otherwise, you know, that rib nut would have been right on this ridge, and that's a pretty deep ridge to ask for a rib nut. Maybe just 2 sandwich pieces of sheet metal might work out, but that's even pushing it. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to continue moving on. Okay. So I kind of had the same thought. This is under the driver door. This is the front one for the driver's side bracket. Had the same thought where the riv nut's going to be on this groove. Not happy with that, so I modified another bracket to lower it where the rib nuts are, and you can see where that is, basically right here and here, right here and here. So that should be a better fit, I think. And after marking the holes, see how they're on a nice flat surface. That's what you want for a rib nut. Alright, so the driver's side isn't quite as thick with this coating here, but just for illustrative purposes, here's a Forstner bit. It's basically a flat bit with a point there. I don't know if you can see that. There's a point in the middle. It's used a lot in woodworking for making a nice flat surface on a hole as you drill down. I'm going to use it here, just stick in that point into the pilot hole, and then should be able to just kind of grind away at this stuff. And there you go. You have a nice clean circle around it that the rib nut will be happy with. And obviously you have to paint over all of that, which shouldn't be a problem. But yeah, so that's how you do it. And then I'll come back with a bigger drill and drill the hole in after that. And just in case it's not clear, you don't want to put a lot of pressure. Just kind of slowly go through it and just lightly put enough pressure that it's engaged. That's all you have to do. It'll come off real easy. And that's what it looks like after the rib nut hole is drilled and deburred. Now paint. And now it's nicely time to move on to installing the rib nuts on the passenger side. Now, installing rib nuts is really not that complicated. You basically need a rib nut tool, just like this. Now the rib nut tool that I have is a beefy one for basically the biggest rib nuts you can get, I believe 3/8. I had to use them for the seat install. If you want to watch that video, go ahead after this one. But basically you screw the rib nut on, open it up, screw it on all the way, stick it in, and clamp down. Open up, just tighten down, clamp down. And you just repeat this process over and over again until you get to a lot of force. Like that should be good. And then you can just unscrew. It'll take a while to unscrew. But there you go. Install rib nut right there. And you just rinse and repeat all the way down. Okay, now we install the brackets. So first things first, get this guy up. You use this backing plate behind here. Probably easier to get it with one screw in, just like that. And then get the next screw here into the hole. There's no extra washer on these ones, purely just the nut. I would probably have preferred to see a washer, but it is what it is. Those finger tight. And then for the rib nut hardware, you do use a washer under the bolt head. Hopefully you can see all of this. Washer under the bolt. And if everything lines up, that would be very nice. So we will try and power through this one. Alright. And then for these, you need a 7/16 wrench, the standard size for 1/4-20 hardware. There you go. First bracket, that's pretty solid. Now to continue on down the line. Okay, they're all installed. pretty sturdy, I would say. Not too worried about that. It's really not too hard to get all 5 of them. Took about 15 minutes to install. Make sure when you do the nylocks here, you have some threads sticking out. Keep tightening until you do. You'll see this kind of compresses a bit. That's good. You want it to compress and stretch to get the proper clamp load on this. Alright, so now we move to what they call the B brackets, which are these guys right here. There's a couple different designs. You can see this one has an open end there. This is the very front one under the front door. And all the others here with the closed end on the bottom are further down the line. And basically, there is a driver's side and a passenger side, and you want to have it mounted so that this face is on the front of the vehicle with the bracket bent towards the back. So you see how this is bent here and mounted just like that. So the bent goes towards the back. And then you take your hardware. This is now a different size hardware. It's 3/8 inch size. And you have a washer on both the bolt head and underneath the nut. So I think I'm just going to start with one, get that kind of finger tight, washer, and then nut, and just sort of screw that on, and then I'll get the other one on. Okay, so again, washer underneath the bolt head, stick that through, and then we have washer, and then the nut. And then you use a 9/16 wrench on the nut and a 7/32 hex driver on the bolt. So at this point you just want to get it fairly tight but not super tight. And probably more or less in position, just enough so that you can kind of wiggle it around if you need to. So now let's do the next one. And again, for all the ones behind the front doors, it's the same exact process except for you're using the ones with the closed end over here. So washer under the bolt, that in there, then washer, and then nut, that started. Repeat for the other bolt, like that. And then washer, and then nuts. Alright, now all the B brackets are on. Pretty easy. They're still loose, so when I get the step on, I can maneuver as I need. Alright, so this is basically where the OWL van instructions video ends. So with this guy, you simply just put it on here. These holes, these smaller holes, are tapped for accepting a screw. There's this little bag of hardware here, which is for these plates, and I guess the front bracket when you mount it on the vehicle. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly put this plate on here, and you want to be careful because this is aluminum, so these threads are going to be very weak. So just really carefully, don't use an impact wrench, just use a hex wrench driver and go hand tight, give it a little tightness, and that's it. Alright, so now that is installed. Thought about painting that lower plate pan or something to match the van. I don't know. Let me know what you think. Should I do that? Now, let's put this on the van. Now some of the hardware, like for here, did come in the package in the packet with the hardware for that plate. So just be cognizant of that. This is actually a smaller size bolt on the front step than it is all the others. So everything is just nice and loose. There's a washer under the bolt head, but not under the nut. And just get it all in there nice and loose, and then you can position it as you want and tighten down. Okay, so it's just loosely mounted. You can see there's still wiggle room, and also obviously like this. First thing I'm going to do is get it positioned where I want fore and aft on the van. There's really only so much you can do because this front one does kind of limit you. There's lots of positions and slots and everything behind here, but this one on the front, it's only that one. But so you can basically, you know, move it about an inch or so. I'm going to keep it as far forward as I can. And now basically just tighten down on all these top ones, and then I will position it nice and horizontal and tighten the B brackets underneath. And with these slots, these bolts can move back and forth. I'm going to try and get them nice and lined up as best as I can as I tighten them down. And again, to tighten them down, a 9/16 wrench on the nut down here, and then a 7/32 hex key for the top. Okay, got them all basically centered with each other, or in line with each other. For this front one, I think it's probably a 5/16 screw, so you use a 3/16 driver bit, hex bit, and a 1/2 inch wrench on the nut. Now that this is all in place, secure, get this lifted up, and yeah, not too bad. Now tighten. Now we need to tighten underneath. You'll test right here. Pretty good. Oop. Keep it nice and clean. Now for the gripper bag, or for the tread plate here, you can basically position it anywhere you want. They kind of had it over here, right where you would come in. I don't know if I want that lip there every single time, so I'm going to put it on the back half of the door. And it came with its own bag of hardware, so I'm just going to use these and basically mount it just like so. You don't need to wipe your shoes off. Go over here if you need to. Use this guy. Should be pretty good. Looks like these will have a nut or washer on both the bolt head and on the nut. Get it all started. Passenger side is complete. Let's open it up and see what it's like to get in. Oh, that's much nicer. So you can really only get your toes on it. but I guess that's okay because you don't want it sticking out too far. Only thing maybe would be a little bit better if this was a smaller tube that fit underneath the body, but it is what it is. It's easier to get in and out. Let's go measure how much of a difference it makes. So before, it was roughly 23 inches, and now it is just about 15 3/4 of an inch off the ground. So that's about a 7 1/4 inch difference. That's a full step. That's pretty good. That's going to make a big difference getting in and out. All right. Now I'm going to finish up the driver's side. It should basically be the same process. If there's anything different, I'll let you know. How's this one? Man, that's so much difference. So I had a thought about these slots on these brackets underneath here. Basically, they're the wrong direction. So if anybody from OWL ever sees this video, make these slots vertical, like this, not horizontal. Make them vertical, and that way you can have a little bit more leeway for overcoming things like where these ridges are, where they go down, which is where, especially on the driver's side, it seems like they all lined up pretty well there. And you know, I wouldn't have to modify these things like I did. So just a little tip from a design standpoint, you know, it's not a matter of, because I'm sure, you know, there's some areas where you can't go higher on this bracket, especially on the passenger side, but here, if you go vertical, you know, you're not using the bolt body, the shank, to actually rest up against this metal. That's not what holds it on. It's a clamping force. So it doesn't matter if it's vertical or not. So just bring it down, have it be, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch long or something like that. And you can have plenty of leeway to get a good grip on that. Just my 2 cents. So I originally put the tread plate here, thinking I wouldn't use it that often, but what I realized coming out of the van is because this is only a couple inches really where you have to put your foot, and this is round tube, you can kind of slip off, especially coming out. So I think I'm going to actually end up moving it basically where they kind of picture it in all their marketing. Anyways, so that'll be a quick move. I'll do that. But overall, I'm generally pretty happy with the product itself. Had a couple hiccups with the installation. Now I did actually write on OWL Vans' instructions on the YouTube page asking for written instructions. They did say that they are working on them, but with all the products, and they're always updating the products, it takes some time. So hopefully we'll see something in the future with some more written instructions. Other than that, I mean, it's a great looking product. And I love the Sherpa holes that they put on them because it's just gonna add even more flexibility as things come out. I'll show you the driver's side. And it ends basically right there. And that's where the next video is gonna be, installing the ladder. Make sure you're subscribed. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video and learned a couple tricks for installing the OWL Van side steps. Overall, I love the product already. It's much easier to get in and out of the van, so I'm very happy about that. Definitely good job there. I think they will hopefully work on instructions soon. Might take some time, but they have a lot of products. They change them a lot to, I guess, improve the design as they go. So, you know, willing to give them the benefit of the doubt and see how it goes in the future. Make sure you like the video in case you did learn something or helped you install the side steps yourself. Leave a comment down below if you have anything to say, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. See ya. Bye.